Hi, folks. This is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. You know, I've always had, I guess you could say, my go-to lures. And there was years and years when I was doing TV shows and I was traveling all over. I really wasn't taking a lot or hardly any lures with me. It would be one particular thing that I knew I could catch fish on. And maybe because it was my go-to lure, maybe it's because that's about all I used that I got so I could use it where it looked pretty good. Now, I'll give you a couple examples. Number one, probably more than anything that I've ever caught fish on in my life, because I've used it so much, is a bucktail jig. Just a simple bucktail jig. But I can make that jig just become magic. I can make it dance and dart and do whatever just by manipulating the rod. And that's fun for me. Then along several years ago, there were some folks in Canada that came to me. They were three men. Two of them were like woodsmen, and the third one was a engineer. And they had invented a lure that they were using in Quebec, because in Quebec at the time, you weren't allowed to use live minnows. And they wanted something that would look alive to the fish. They called it the Hydra. And they asked me if I'd use it on my show, and I told them I would use it, but I would continue to use it only if it worked. I'm not going to tell people about something and not be telling them the truth. If it's no good, I'm not going to use it. So they said, that's okay, we'll go with that. And it became not only my go-to lure, but honestly, it was called the Hydra. And you still can find some of them around. And they were a hard bait head with a needle coming through it, and then you attached a soft plastic minnow-looking body, and you could make it dance and dart in the water and do all kinds of things. And I ended up catching some of the biggest fish of my life of every species. Every single species I tried this on, I caught fish on it. So it was my go-to lure. But let me switch ahead now to just in the last couple of years. And I've come to be using my certain go-to lures that I had tremendous faith in and caught a lot of fish. And then things seem to change. And I don't know if it's because fish become so used to seeing something that sticks them and pricks them if you don't end up killing them, that they decide, I don't want to eat this. It's too dangerous. I don't know if that's the case or not, but all of a sudden, these lures might not work as well as they did, let's say, a month ago. And I'll give you a specific example of this. This summer, I started using a crayfish look-alike made by Guggen. It was a 3-inch soft plastic crayfish-looking lure. Had lots of just natural rippling in the water because of the soft plastic used. And boy, did I catch fish this summer on this lure. It became my go-to. It's all I needed to take. I knew I could catch any fish, which included not only bass, but even muskies. I had muskies hitting it every time I go out. And then they stopped hitting it. And I'm like, what in the world is happening here? So I had to find another go-to lure that I could start catching fish again on. And that became a tube jig, especially a Berkeley tube, because of the soft plastic that it used. So this just gives you some examples of what I'm talking about. Next year, will that be my go-to lure? It will if I catch fish after fish on it, but as soon as it doesn't perform for me, I'll switch and find another go-to lure. And I think you should be the same. We can get really almost settled into something and think it's the only way, but sometimes it isn't, and it's good to experiment and explore new ways. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.